Welcome back. We're in match 6, round 6 of MXP Oakland, and I promise a sweet match. I think you're going to like it. It's 5-color Indomitable Creativity against Merfolk. Now, Jarvis, I spent my morning watching the big tournament. It was the European Championship in Modern. For anyone who wants to watch a whole lot of Modern tomorrow, you have the advantage of time zones. You can check out the Legacy. The event is called the Legacy European Tour, but it's played in Modern. You can watch that in the morning American time, and then tune into us later as we're on Pacific time here for the event in Oakland. But I saw Merfolk just looking awesome on camera in that event, and I was like, "Holy smokes!" This deck that I thought was, a joke or at least a lower tier strategy is just crushing people. It was 7-1 when I tuned in, and here it seems to be doing the same thing, 5-0 in the hands of Thomas Montoya.
Yeah, I would say there are probably two types of people: people who love Merfolk and people who don't really love Merfolk.
Which are you?
I hate to say it, I don't really love Merfolk. But, I think that's counterbalanced by you loving Merfolk,
Yeah, I have played Merfolk in the past, like the very early days when Merfolk was just getting sweet with the cards all printed in Lorwyn block. I played Merfolk a lot, and I loved it. But this is a deck that, like, I kind of love it when I'm playing with it, and I hate it when I'm playing against it. It's just designed to sort of make people miserable, I think.
So we have 2 Cavern of Souls, a Japanese island, and 2 Lord of Atlantises. Interestingly enough, Thomas is being cagey with those Lord of Atlantises.
Okay, and what do you make of that? What's his thought process?
I think he's waiting for a situation where you can somehow avoid one getting lightning bolted by waiting for enough counters on your Aether Vials. But for that to happen, you have to have like 2 more Lords in your hand, right?
Yeah, is it possible that so it can't be I'm sorry, what's the middle land on the battlefield?
It's a cavern. Expedition Cavern.
So he can't be holding up Counterspell then.
So I also took a look at the deck list. There's 0 counterspells in the main deck.
Okay, so yeah, I do agree with you that this is some, I guess, unintuitive and conservative play on Thomas's side. Not necessarily going to say it's bad, but because he knows his deck very well and he's done a great job to get here. Clearly has a good plan. But yeah, I'm curious to see why the Lord of Atlantis are not getting deployed early.
So when I said Thomas has no counterspells, he actually has access to subtlety. You might see Merfolk Trickster here, I guess, right? That looks like a Merfolk Trickster to me.
Okay, so this makes sense to me, Jarvis, that he would start with the non-Lord Merfolk and then deploy the Lord of Atlantis later. That's generally good sequencing with the tribal deck.
I think a really powerful card that really improved Merfolk was Sililin of Sea and Sky. I always have a problem pronouncing that card. It's very difficult for me. Ooh,
this looks like an all foil Merfolk deck too. I'm impressed by people's collections here. This is cool stuff.
I think that
not all foil.
Yeah,
mostly foil. Enough to impress me, at least. We'll put it that way.
Oh, wait, I just looked at that stomping ground. It almost looks like a meteor storm, right?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
I do love that Lord of Atlantis. The old foiling is just chef's kiss. That's a lightning bolt, probably from a secret lair. I couldn't tell you which one, honestly.
All right. Lightning bolt targeting Lord of Atlantis. You could have seen it in 1993, but it's still happening 30 years later, just with much different versions of the cards.
I will say that it is surprising to see Joseph discard no cards to the Fable of the Mirror Breaker with Ren 6 out.
Yeah, so we didn't really dive too deep into it, but in the early game, it looked like Joseph had to play Ren 6 onto the battlefield with no fetch land yet. Then he did find a fetch land on a future turn, but what that means to me is that he probably has a land light spell heavy hand.
Yep.
But that's kind of ideal because once you have one Ren and one fetch land, you're making your land drops every turn. So you want the stacked hand full of action going into the mid and late game.
Yeah, definitely agree with you. The lack of actual counterspell from the Merfolk deck in game one, I think that might be a huge deal because it basically means if a creativity for any amount is put on the stack, I think it's going to be pretty difficult to recover from a cruel ultimatum of sorts.
Yeah, I could see a world where like a board of multiple Island Walk lords can actually beat one Archon of Cruelty, but anything except that exact circumstances, I agree with you. A resolved creativity is going to be very, very bad news for Thomas Montoya.
All right, the way Thomas's deck is constructed, you see sideboard mana weak, and that's because there's actually a lot of colorless lands in the main deck. There are 4 Cavern Souls, 4 Mutavault.
Fascinating. And yeah, 4 Force of Negation, but only appearing in the sideboard. That's, I think, a card that really improved Merfolk and its ability to take on a wide range of opponents.
So we see a second Lord of Atlantis, a Merfolk of the Pearl, Master of the Pearl Trident. That's a lot of damage.
Yeah, a lot of island walking damage specifically. So I think it's just now or never for Joseph. He's got to do something big with Indomitable Creativity, but he may be able to.
I would say a little bit about Indomitable Creativity nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my creativity deck would kill outright here. Although my creativity deck would not be very good against Merfolk Trickster.
Your creativity deck, I think, would die to Merfolk Trickster here, yes.
Yeah, how come nobody brought that to the Pro Tour?
It's funny because it was legal, right? It's from Dominaria.
Indeed.
But let's see. If we creativity for 3, you get 3 Archons. And in fact, there's actually exactly 3 Archon cruelties in Joseph's deck. There are no persists. This is a very different version of creativity than I'm used to seeing in this format.
Yeah, so notably, in addition to the 4 creativities, he has 1 Transmogrify. And this is what I outlined a moment ago. I don't think Transmogrify for 1 Archon of Cruelty would be enough here.
No.
I think this has got to be like I'm putting multiple Archons onto the battlefield outright.
You mean like that?
Yes, exactly like this.
So the treasure should be dead, but I think Joseph tapped it to indicate that it was, being paid for the creativity instead of being targeted. And this is a lot, is how I would put it.
I can't really think of anything Thomas can do with only 1 card in hand. And losing 3 creatures, the opponent gaining 9 life, it's just way too much. Like maybe...
Hold on, is that Voldalian Hexcatcher? Oh, if it's Hexcatcher, that's plenty. It's not Hexcatcher. Okay.
It's Silvergill Adept. Perhaps looking for a Hexcatcher?
I believe Hexcatcher would wrap that game up very easily.
All right, so we're going to get to see the whole library from Joseph Puglisi.
Well, maybe not. It depends on where the Archons actually are, right? In fact, they were all within like the top 20 cards.
All right, so you're going to sacrifice the 3 non-lord creatures. Joseph's going to go up to 13.
Yep.
And then, yeah, Well, I mean, maybe if he drew another creature here and then draws another lord off the top, is it possible?
But then you use Ryan 6 to shoot a Silvergill Adept, right?
Well, you'll sacrifice all the non-lord creatures.
Yep.
And then you have 10 Island Walk. So if Thomas draws a lord here, then I think he beats triple Archon of Cruelty.
Wow, that's kind of impressive, actually.
Yeah, I mean, like, let me put it this way. If Joseph had put 2 Archon of Cruelties onto the battlefield, this would have been a no contest in favor of the Merfolk player. Like, that is pretty amazing. And it's still coming down to the last draw step.
Wait, do we have Mountain Lightning Bolt? Oh, no, we already played a land for turn. So I believe Thomas knows that a lord off the top is lethal. So lord or bust.
All right, show us. Come on, Thomas.
Would you just windmill slam it here?
Oh, okay. He's thinking about the ether vials. That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. The consideration is like, Silvergill Adept into something else.
I would have slammed it. Just showmanship,
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear cut. Just Lord. Oh,
yeah. Man. I mean,
I found myself rooting for the Merfolk player there. That was a wild game. Yeah, I mean, we sort of knew that the creativity player had a lot of good stuff going on there based on A, not having the fetch land with Ren indicating the spell heavy hand.
Right.
B, not looting with the Fable Chapter 2. But he really had exactly what he needed to get over the finish line with the triple Archon. And it's like, yeah, if he had 1 less mana, if he had drawn one of his 3 Archons, if the Merfolk player had drawn a Lord there's a lot of things that could have changed the outcome of that game. Very, very impressive, I guess, from both decks, honestly.
So, interestingly, there's an Iona and Elshnorn in the creativity sideboard. Mother of Machines, not Grandson of Bait. I guess I should probably clarify that.
Okay, do you expect those cards to come in?
I think Iona is actually not where you want to be, because the issue is I think Iona comes out too late after all of the damage has been done, if I had to guess.
Okay. It's also really poor against Ether Vial.
Yep. From the Merfolk side, I would expect Spreading Seas, Mana Leak, Force of Negation to come in.
So this might actually substantially improve for the Merfolk player after sideboarding, because basically just the counter spells are really impactful, and the creativity deck I don't think is able to change all that much.
Agree with you. Also, Spreading Seas on a mountain is like surprisingly annoying, especially often how these creativity decks are built. They often only have 1 shock land of the appropriate type. That appears to be a Sacred Foundry.
What are those lands? Oh, they're not islands? I don't care.
But Tide Shaper turn Sacred Foundry down. Ooh, love it. Just flip it over. That is a smart way of indicating it. Those Dwarven Mines are going to take forever to get online.
So just to clarify for everyone looking at the screen at home, the flipped over land is what these players have agreed on to represent a Sacred Foundry that has been turned into an island. Ironically, the creativity deck does use blue mana, so there could be, it could be like a side grade or an upgrade in terms of Joseph's color situation. but it does notably mess with Dwarven Mine. And regardless of what's going on with the lands here, it kind of looks like Joseph's just getting pounded by the nice Merfolk curve out.
That was a fast one. Yeah.
Right. Not too much words of wisdom from me and Jarvis on that particular game. That was just sort of an uncontested Merfolk curve out, and now we're on to a quick game 3. The big thing that's going to change is, of course, who gets to go first. And I think it was just too much for Joseph and the creativity deck that game to be behind against a turn 1 Ether Vial on the play and a good draw.
Yeah, the other thing is, by taking out the Sacred Foundry, it's actually hard for Joseph to have enough removal for all of the lords, because a lot of the removal spells are like prismatic endings. He has 2 ending, 1 March of Otherworldly Light, and it looks like there is actually a Destroy Evil in the sideboard, but I don't think that'll come in, because I think once you're at to the point where you can cast Destroy Evil on lords, you're probably dying too fast.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, so this is a turn 2 main phase Leyline Binding to try to answer this Ether Vial. It's going to be met with Force of Negation, which is interesting and makes me wonder if it would have been actually marginally better to upkeep the Leyline Binding. Yeah,
this is something Paulo has talked about. Just take away the option from your opponent. If you cast it during the upkeep, they don't even have the option to cast Fawn.
Yeah, and it's it was a Cavern of Souls, the land for Thomas Montoya. So even in the closed deck list tournament, there's not really any fear of something like a Spell Pierce. So yeah, I think it would have worked out better for Joseph to upkeep the Leyline Binding in that particular case. Still a good exchange for him. Let's not lose sight of that. He spent 1 mana and got 2 cards out of Thomas's hand. So this game is shaping up to be potentially a lot closer than game 2.
This is a classic scenario where you use Dismember or any removal spell to answer half of a Fable, and it feels kind of bad.
To be honest with you, Jarvis, I'm rather surprised to see Dismember in after sideboarding in the matchup.
It's funny you bring that up. I actually think it's probably correct. And the reason is, in a lot of games, I think Joseph just has to go for creativity from 1, so that's probably why it's in.
Okay, cool. So you could use this good mode of killing a Goblin Shaman, or you can throw a little wrench in the works when they go for a creativity on a Dwarf token.
So this time it looks like we're going to see cards that discourage a Fable. 1 card only. So Joseph has 1 expressive iteration in the deck, which is a very bizarre number to look at, but
love it. I love doing stuff like that.
Well, I sort of view it as like the 5th grindy card, whereas like Fable's obviously better, but iteration is a nice extra, supplementary card, right?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts here is like, you might think that drawing multiple expressive iterations would cause your draw to be clunky and slow, but drawing 1, you can find a good spot for it. You might think this is not a great game 1 card, but after sideboarding for the grindy matchup, it kind of rounds out my configurations well. I like it. I could see myself going with a configuration like that.
That's a very Reed thing to do. I think the person who was actually originally responsible for it was Gold Ducat, aka Daniel Gottschall. But I think he had like 4. He had 4 in his deck, so I think people slowly like trimmed down the number.
So meanwhile, this game is close. I like Thomas's position in terms of having the nice mana underneath him and the Ether Vial on 2. On the other hand, Joseph is a lot happier to just simply be alive at this point in the game, to have more mana on the battlefield and to start threatening Indomitable Creativity.
Yeah. So we're reading Sylvan of, what is it? I really just can never remember the name of this card.
All right. Let me come in with the assist here. Sphalon of Sea and Sky.
Okay, got it.
Merfolk God.
I do know that that card is extremely powerful. Like, I do think it's one of the reasons that Merfolk research as a deck. Because certain decks, it's very problematic to kill that very easily. It's just so good. Like, remember when Ophidian cost 3 mana?
Yeah, this one doesn't even have to connect in combat. It just merely has to be
No,
declared as an attacker to draw a card.
Do you think Johnny Magic would have played that card instead of Ophidian if he could have?
Yes, I do. In fact, I mean,
Yes.
you paid a high price for a 3-mana 3/4 back in the day, and you were happy to have it.
Oh, right, so I think the word trigger was missed.
Okay, so what we have the players calling a judge. What do you think this is about? Can you
So
fill me in?
Lightning Bolt was cast on Merfolk Trickster, but Sylvian of Sea and Sky grants Ward 1 to other Merfolk. But I think it's just a simple mistrigger, probably.
Right. Okay. So Ward is not. So if there was something like Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, that would be a static increased cost to spells that both players are responsible for for paying as part of a legal game state. Ward, however, is a triggered ability. So it's on the controller of the ward creature to point out the ward and basically ask the opponent to pay an extra 1 mana. If that doesn't happen, then it's just a legal game state, a missed ward trigger, and the lightning bolt resolving.
I don't think it's a big deal because it was at Thomas's end step. So, like, I think Joseph would have gladly just paid the extra 1 and just untapped, and the board would be exactly the same. So, do we have white mana for Leyline Binding? Do we have a Leyline Binding in our hand?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm a lost cause in terms of identifying these. Yes, I think one is a Jetmir's Gardens.
Okay.
Jetmir's Gardens, Xander's Lounge, Dwarven Mine,
Steam
Vents, and Wooded Foothills. Yeah, so we did confirm with our elite team on the floor that it was a judge call about the ward trigger. So not super material to the outcome of the game, but just a good sort of refresher for the way tournament floor rules are handled. So how are you evaluating this board state? Whose position do you like here?
I think it's close. If Joseph has a good play this turn, I think he's pretty far ahead. But if he just says go and the Sylvian starts attacking, it's not great. Oh, actually, we're getting the Oracle text on Vodalian Hexcatcher, is what actually what's going on.
So it looks like that's the sign of a person who's considering and going for indomitable creativity.
I think
it should be for 1 or 2.
Yeah, I think you could suss that out because creativity was discarded to Fable a turn ago.
Great point.
It's kind of a hard sell to discard that card when it's the namesake card in your deck if you don't already have another one.
Yeah, good point, Jarvis. I'm glad you brought it up. I think a common misconception for a newer player is they think, oh, there's already an indomitable creativity in the graveyard, so that reduces the chances that my opponent has another one. But actually, sometimes it's more appropriate to use context clues and think, well, my opponent chose voluntarily to discard one, so that actually kind of makes it likely they have another one.
So it wasn't actually creativity, it was transmogrify instead, but that's sort of similar here. Gosh, Cruel Ultimatum.
Yeah, so Archon of Cruelty here. Thomas is going to need to be able to violate a creature to stay in the game, because if that just cleanly answers Sphalem and there's no creature on the battlefield for the Merfolk player, it's going to be totally lights out. Even if Thomas can, quote, stay in the game, he has to contend with the devastating combination of Reflection of Kiki-Jiki plus Archon of Cruelty. So I think we're going to have to see something very special and, frankly, very specific from Thomas Montoya, or this is going to go in favor of the creativity deck.
Looks like Master of the Pearl Trident. So I think Joseph's thinking about, say, Lightning Bolt in response or something similar. I guess not. Oh, no, the Lightning Bolt wouldn't even work because of the ward. That's right. All right, there's a lot of work to be done off of this Sylvian. But the problem is if you attack, it just gets blocked, right?
Yeah, so you really want an Island Walk Lord here in order to progress your own game state. But once again, like the real elephant in the room is Reflection of Kiki-Jiki Archon. That is not that is not remotely like beatable. We saw game one, the Merfolk army put up a good fight against the overwhelming odds. But this is just too much. Like, first of all, another enters the battlefield trigger. Second of all, multiple Archons attacking. I mean, it's just straight up lethal here. And then you're not even mentioning like all of the influx of cards and mana that Joseph would have to work with on his side. So let's see something big happen here, or else this game's over.
Yeah, I actually think I would not block with the Archon to play around Dismember. Yeah.
So the Dismember could hit the Reflection.
Yes.
If Joseph was to not block. Also kind of a reasonable spot where your opponent might just be like stone cold bluffing out of inspiration. So I think it's definitely worth thinking about, worth talking about. But yeah, looks like Thomas just didn't have what he needed here, and the Archon's going to carry the day.
Well, the only reason I bring that up is I think theoretically you could lose to Dismember on the Archon by blocking there, whereas I think 2 extra damage doesn't really matter on you.
Yes, I think that's accurate. Yeah, I think you're totally right, Jarvis. If Joseph had nothing relevant in his hand, then he probably should not block with the Archon. But it could be that his position was so strong that he just didn't matter either way. But that is creativity advancing to 6-0. We'll see Joseph tomorrow in day 2. Merfolk 5-1, no slouch there.